Hey, and welcome to another edition of the Best Kept Secrets in Healthcare show. And so today I have a very special guest, someone I've known for, I don't know, gosh, I'm thinking close to 20 years now. But he is an upper doctor in Hickory, North Carolina. He is a diplomat in upper cervical. He's been doing all kinds of cool stuff in his office, which I actually want to do, have him come back to do some other podcasts, or else we'll be here all day on some of the things that he's been doing, some of the research he's done with some of his patients. We've been trying, he's very busy, travels a lot, speaks a lot of different places. So we've been trying to get him on the show for some time, and he's actually still in the office today. So we're fortunate to be able to get a few minutes with him. So help me. I want to welcome Dr. Joey Miles. Thanks for coming on, man.
Ray, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Well, it's been a while. We've been talking about doing this show for, I know, at least 2 or 3 months, and trying to hook up with the time. And so I'm glad we finally could. I know because of some of the stuff you've actually taught me a lot over the last several months actually last probably over a year now, since you had kind of a serious health scare that really kind of opened your eyes to some other things. Knowing you over the years, you've gone, I would look at you and think you're one of the healthiest people on the planet. I mean, you actually paid a nutritionist to help come up with the perfect diet plan for you. You lost a bunch of weight. I joke around about, your looks all the time. You sent me a picture the other day and I'm like, dude, don't send me a high school picture. And you're like, what are you, like 47 or something now?
44.
44. Yeah. Look like you're 25. So when you had the health scare that you did, I want you to explain to us what happened. It kind of rattled all of us, all your friends a little bit, like, holy shit, if it can happen to him, it could happen to any one of us. And so some of the stuff you've learned, I thought, this is great stuff for people that follow our show. And those are people that are looking for natural ways to improve their health, really, non-medical approaches to feeling better, looking better, living longer. So give us a little idea. What exactly was this health scare? And can you lead up to what happened and how it changed your life?
Yeah. So, you and I have known each other for nearly 2 decades here, and we've both been really passionate about learning about health and taking care of ourselves. And yeah, you shared, we all go through health transformations. This was kind of another level of that is, I think when you grow up in a family where there's been, I don't know, different health conditions. I grew up with dad having heart disease basically my whole life. And my grandfather, my dad's dad, passed away of a heart attack. So both of them ended up with bypass surgery in their 40s. And so here I am, 44, taking care of myself better probably in the last decade and a half than I ever have, having the ability to have knowledge and resources, of course, like you and other good friends where we reach out and try and help each other be the best we can be. So going through that process, I came out of school broke and fat and out of shape and spending all these times studying and just trying to get through the whole school thing. So I had to relearn how to take care of myself, I guess, a more mature way over the years. But yeah, back in 2014, I started really recognizing that I need to take care of myself better. So just like you shared, I reached out to a good friend of mine and got some guidance on learning more about hormones and a little bit cleaner nutrition, dialed that in, and then incorporating even rotational eating and fasting and all those things have been just a huge asset to myself, but not only myself, but the patients I take care of. And then last year, really feeling good. I did have I say an episode, my wife gets on to me more because when I look back at it, it was like I had a little indigestion maybe. I had one episode where I ate dinner late and I think I had some reflux, really, to be honest. I woke up, felt something. About the time I sat up, it was gone, but it did startle me. I hadn't had something like that. That was, I think, December or January of 23, January 24, December 23, but no events or anything after that. And then we were on a family retreat. My family and I, we do a family retreat annually. And I was on this retreat. It's a time where we spend together in prayer and growing as a family. And I just had it heavy on me that, Grandpa had bypass surgery. My dad had bypass surgery. And Lord knows I really didn't think that's what I was in for. But I did have it heavy on me in some prayer time that I should go get checked. So I started the journey, reached out to a great colleague here in town. It's a DO, but 25-year veteran of ER, but now has gotten into functional medicine. And he and I have shared patients and dialogue over the years. So anyways, I reached out to him and got started. And the great thing is he took the concern serious, and said, I don't think this is something we should ignore. I think we should go through, chase this all the way to the end. So we started off with blood work. Ultimately, what he came back from with the blood work was saying, I really just think there's probably some stress that lifestyle stuff we could probably clean up a little bit, but no indication of heart attacks or anything way outside of normal range or anything like that. But he said, let's do a cardiac calcium CT scan. So we ordered that. Takes about 5 minutes. You go in and get a scan of your chest. Usually costs around $100 or less for people to get this. If it comes back as 0, basically what that tells us is that there's no calcified calcium in your arteries. He said if it doesn't come back as 0, then we can decide if we want to keep looking, moving forward. So I went and had that done. Got the results back really within a day, and it wasn't a 0. So it wasn't off the chart. Talked to him. He said, it's a little high, but I've seen much higher and everything's fine. Let's just keep moving. Let's contact a cardiologist. I had a patient of mine whose husband's a cardiologist, reached out, was able to get in pretty quickly. Right off the bat, him being a cardiologist, great guy, but, he said, hey, I think we need to get you in, do a heart cath. And I said, well, hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit before we do a heart cath. Maybe we could look a little closer at some other things. Did EKGs, echocardiograms, everything's looking good. Did a stress test. I felt pretty well in the stress test, other than it's meant to stress you, and it I guess it did. But he said something didn't quite look right on the nuclear imaging, and ultimately he got what he wanted, which was let's get in and do a heart cath. So we went ahead and did that. That was on a Tuesday. I was scheduled to see patients on Wednesday, and during the heart cath, it was over pretty quick. He came over. I didn't really even know they were in there that far, and he said, well, we're done. And I said, well, that's quick. He said, well, when it's quick, it's either really good or we need to talk. And he said, unfortunately, we need to talk. So they said the top of the LAD, which is the widowmaker side, it bifurcates, which means it splits. It supplies blood to the front of the left side of the heart and the back of the heart. In that area, it was a little narrow. And he said it's a bad spot for a narrowing. It's a high pressure area. It's not great for stenting. We can put a stent in there, but problems with stents is sometimes they shift. If that happens, you can have a heart attack. We're not prepared for that. So let's go have a conversation. And I was in good shape, good health. The cardiothoracic surgeon came in and said, really, if it were me, the best thing I would do is do a bypass. Let's give your body another couple blood supply there, and then go from there. So that was on Tuesday when I got that information, and we did bypass surgery on a Friday. So it was a pretty quick ordeal.
So he felt like it was that important that, something could have happened that quickly, just within a few days, that, it was that major?
Well, I think it was location. Right. So he said, now that we know it's there, really, here's the situation. You find out information like that, I think there's 3 options. Now, the cardiologist is probably not going to see the 3 options, but I'll tell you from my perspective, there's 3 options. One option is we don't do anything, meaning we don't do any intervention as far as cardiologist intervention.
Right.
And believe it or not, I've got some other great colleagues that I reached out to during that time, and there were some recommendations that that's a path that I went. Mm-hmm. In hindsight, maybe I've learned a lot. Maybe that's an option, that possibility. I understand the recommendation and I can see that. And, I'll be honest, obviously if it's someone else, it's easier to make that decision when it's you.
Right.
And I've got 5 kids, as you know, and a family and many more years, I plan to be around. So that was a tough one to make, particularly in a short period of time. So the other option was a stent. The downside of that was, again, they could fail. And he said, we might be in a similar situation 5 to 7 years from now. And who knows what your health's going to look like there. None of us know what could happen? Heaven forbid a bad accident that took my health
Right.
down. So obviously the health and the risk, open heart surgery, or not open heart surgery, but open chest, going in for a bypass is major surgery. I've never been in the hospital, never had a surgery. But my wife and I, we've our relationship's grown tremendously in the last decade. But we're really prayerfully, we both felt a lot of peace in that. So that's that's where we went.
Well, and it was successful, right? So the
Still
good
here.
news that's one thing you should never really have to worry about, right?
Yeah, I think, well, actually, I'll tell you this. This was a bit shocking, of course, as well. So then after you get through a procedure like that, particularly with our background in education, you get an opportunity to go through and you can do some deep dives, which I, of course, did. Read a book called Understanding the Heart by Dr. Stephen Hussey. Reached out to Dr. Hussey. He's got a great cardiovascular story as well, but it's become his passion to teach people how to prevent getting in this situation, or if you're in this situation, what do you do after? And so one of the things he's really done a deep dive in, and he talks about this in his book, is elective stents and elective bypass surgery have not been shown in the literature to statistically prevent a heart attack, right? So that's shocking. So why would people do an elective stent or elective bypass is to prevent the heart attack? Well, the research says it doesn't do that.
Right.
So what does that mean? Well, I think what that means is most likely, kind of what you were alluding to a little bit, is like a lot of us, we get a procedure done and you say, well, now I'm good. And now I can just go back to living however I want to live, and hopefully everything will be okay. And I think that happens a lot. It happens not only in heart disease, but it happens in diabetes. It happens in many metabolic conditions. In the medical world, of course, many patients, take a medication and they say, well, now I can do whatever I want because the medication takes care of that. And of course, you and I know that's not true.
Right.
And I think that's the reason for the stats to be that way. So the first half of the book, his book, Dr. Hussey, talks about here's the problems with that approach. And the second half of the book is some of the solutions. And I know that's some of the stuff we'll get into here, is talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. All right. Which leads me to the next subject, right? And so this is something that I've always heard a little bit about, but never completely understood, the circadian rhythm. And I know there's a lot of pieces to it. So maybe if you can give like a circadian rhythm for dummies explanation, maybe, and maybe explain to us first of all a little bit what it is, and then we can talk about things that we can do to help ourselves by following through with it.
That's great. I think I can do that because in some ways I'm still in the early phases of understanding it. So I'll keep it interesting, I'll say. So circadian rhythm really has to do with sleep and wake cycles, having to do with the sun, the impact of that on our hormones, how our hormones play a role in this. And it's really a big deal. And the example I like to start off with sharing with patients that I talk to is, because obviously all my patients are asking me what happened, and I'm telling this story to them, is what I'm learning through this is a lot of conditions and issues that people are dealing with today, and you and I are no different, are consequences of modern living. And so when I say consequences of modern living, we got so many luxuries that we live with that it's hard for us to see that they could be problematic at all. Okay. So I'll give you some examples. You and I could probably look back. The first house I grew up with didn't have air conditioning. Right. So that's, when I share that with my kids, and I know if you do with your kids, they look at you like, what? No air conditioning? What did you do? It's like, we opened windows, we put in fans, we went outside, got under a shade tree. But that's an interesting thing now, is a lot of people will say things like, well, I don't go outside during the summer, it's too hot. Or I don't go outside in the winter because it's too cold.
Right.
And there's consequences to that contribute to circadian rhythms. So what would it look like if we didn't have heating and air or indoor living? A lot of this you have to think back. How did humans survive before all these modern conveniences? And I think a lot of these answers become pretty natural to people when you really start thinking in that, but it's hard to think in that when all these things are around us. So we take care of some Amish community up here, and it's been great to talk to them even after this, because I had questions for them that I didn't even think I had before. So one of them is I asked, because it was wintertime, I had this surgery in September. So we get into winter. I'm getting to see some of the Amish families. And I said, what do y'all do when it gets dark? And, they kind of look at me like, what do you say? Or what are you asking me? And I was like, well, I'm just kind of ask some questions, because I'm seeing some things on how my family lives. And I'm thinking that you all might live a little different. What do y'all do when it gets dark? As far as, I know you all don't have electricity, right? So they were like, well, we light candles, or we have a fireplace. And I was like, do you go to bed earlier? And they were like, yeah. I was like, huh. I was like, well, what about eating? When it gets dark, do you cook dinner? And they were like, no, you don't cook dinner after dark. And I'm like, huh, we do.
Right.
So this started to bring a little bit of awareness. Interesting. We've got modern conveniences that now we're living not necessarily in alignment with nature or with the sun, and not knowing that actually has an impact on your health can be problematic. It's a blind spot that we don't see. One thing there's another doctor, I'll try and drop some names just for people to kind of look into. Dr. Stephen Hussey talks about it in his book. That's been great. He's got a great social media, just resources out there. Has been excellent. There's another guy that I've shared with you. Dr. Jack Cruz is a neurosurgeon that's big into this, but there's many others. These are just two that I've really kind of done some deep dives with. And one of the things that they talked about is the importance of getting up and seeing the sunrise. Mm-hmm. So I was talking about modern convenience. I want to talk about the difference between natural light and artificial light. Fire is natural light. Candle light is natural light. And of course, sunlight is natural light. And maybe I won't go too far down this. Stop me if I get too far in the weeds on this. It's been interesting to study the history of light in this experience. So I'll kind of briefly give you a summary of that, is that fluorescent lights were something that came out in the 60s and 70s and started to be put into buildings and schools. And they do a couple things that are problematic to our circadian rhythms and our biology, how they affect our nervous system. So fluorescent lights, many people know this because, you have patients as well that have sensitivity to those. They say they cause headaches or give them brain fog or issues of that. Uh-huh. Well, fluorescent lights flicker, and a lot of times we can't see that. And sometimes if anybody that's listening to this, if they want to take their cell phone out and take a video of it, and if you put it in slow motion, you can then see the flicker that you have a hard time picking up on it. But just because we can't see it, that doesn't mean our nervous system, our brain doesn't experience it. And so, if you sit in front of a strobe light where you actually see that, you realize pretty quickly, like, I can't tolerate this all day. I can maybe tolerate it for a few minutes at a time, but it becomes stressful on me. Well, in a certain sense, fluorescent lights do that, but they also emit. When you get natural sunlight, you get the whole spectrum of the rainbow. And we can't see that. We only see the brightness, but occasionally we get to see the spectrum through rainbows and things like that. Mm-hmm. The old Pink Floyd picture is good, how the prism goes in from the rainbow into this white light. Yeah. Well, the sun gives us the full spectrum, and it actually changes a bit based upon where the sun is in the sky. Early morning, we get a lot more red light, from the sun. Yeah. So, and it's a critical piece of setting our circadian rhythm and actually setting our hormone production for the day. That stimulation with that red light, when it hits the inside of our brain, there's a portion of the brain that it stimulates to start producing the hormones, particularly melatonin, for sleep that night. And melatonin ends up being a really critical thing for not only sleep, but also for healing and recovering at night. So what we find is that when we take things like exogenous, taking something from the outside in, like taking melatonin, particularly on a consistent basis, when we give something to the body that it creates on itself, it actually inhibits the body from producing itself. So that's a bad strategy in itself, is using melatonin from a supplement standpoint, but you can actually improve the efficiency of your body's ability to produce melatonin. And one of the best ways to do that is seeing the sunlight or seeing the morning sunrise. Wow. Okay. So back a little bit to those fluorescent lights, they emit a green light, a green frequency of light, which, by the way, is never in the history of humanity been something that humans have been exposed to. We've only been exposed to natural light, sunlight, fires, things of that nature. And our biology and our brains are actually again, designed for that natural light, but they're not designed for this artificial light. So there was problems that started to happen with people's health, really, when we trace it back at the advent of artificial light, particularly the fluorescent lights coming into play. I should probably back up a little bit and talk about the Edison light bulb, the incandescent. It actually creates a red type of light. So it's high on the red spectrum. So that's actually a healthy light bulb. It also gets hot. If you remember changing those light bulbs, they would get hot. So that produces a form of infrared light that is also very healthy for our bodies. It helps our bodies produce a type of water. It's called exclusion zone water. This helps with mitochondrial function, which, again, just for the audience to kind of talk about, mitochondria are these energy producing cells of our body. They're in all cells of our body. This exclusion zone water that infrared light produces happens when we're exposed to infrared light, which we get from the sun, from incandescent light bulbs, and from fire such as candles and fireplaces and fire pits or whatever, right? All right, so you got the red spectrum that was good from the incandescent. Then we get the advent of fluorescent lights, which is green and a green blue. Then LED lights come on. Of course, Ray, you remember this when cars started coming out with these LED light bulbs, and you'd be driving down the road, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. It's blinding.
Yeah.
But now we're almost blind to it because all the headlights are that way. So they're still stressful on us, but not as big not as noticeable, I should say, is because it's the norm. It's another modern convenience that's hidden aggravation to us.
Yeah.
So the LED lights produce a strong blue frequency. And this is problematic for multiple reasons. They also tend to flicker. You can record those with your cell phones to see if that's it. That stresses our nervous system. So in the nervous system, just for the audience again, is to kind of talk a little bit about, there's a portion of our nervous system called the autonomics. And the autonomics are the nerves that regulate automatic things that our bodies, that our brain does for our body, essentially heart rate and breathing and digestion and sleep cycles and hormone production. So when you get exposed to flickering lights, that stimulates the sympathetic portion of our nervous system, which is the fight or flight aspect of the autonomics. Being an upper cervical chiropractor, we also know that being out of alignment, having particularly a misalignment in the head-neck relationship, can cause body distortion and spinal compensation that can also stimulate sympathetic nerve activity. And that creates a lot of stress on the organ systems and our body's ability to heal and recover from things. Blue light does this as well. And now, just to kind of, again, where are blue lights? Where do we get exposed to them? All LED lights, commercial LED lights, I should probably say, tablets, cell phones, TV, that's right. And so exposure time is really the problem there. I think that's probably the key, maybe takeaways. You're not going to get away from these things. I don't think there's a way of eliminating, but reduction of exposure. There's also timing. What time of day is it more problematic? So I'll probably touch on that a little bit. Some mitigation is, how do you avoid this? One thing, I probably should have these on, but I've got some yellow tinted glasses. More and more people are starting to see these around and think, oh, wow, those are some cool glasses. That's probably the thing I get most in the office is like your cool glasses. And if I have time, sometimes I'll talk about these. These are a blue light blocking glass. They kind of even show a little bit of a reflection you can see. They got a special coating. You can get these in prescription. I don't have prescription glasses. So what they do is they block the blue light exposure into my brain. I can still see everything that I need to see. These are a daytime lens. So the daytime lens blocks less blue light. So we do actually get blue from the sun and from fire, but it's balanced with the other aspect of the rainbow. Gotcha. What becomes problematic is when it's something unnatural, such as a sharp blue or green exposure. That's the stimulation, that's the stress that our body's not used to. It really wasn't designed to deal with.
Yeah, we've got, I got for my whole family screen protectors over the phone too, that block the blue light. So there's some things that people are coming more aware, and there's obviously more access to get things that can kind of limit, to help reduce that. But that's, I know that's huge. And we spend so much time in front of screens nowadays,
Yes.
And I know the timing, like you said, I know there's certain times a day it's much worse to do than others, right?
So here's a, again, a lot of this stuff will come back to common sense. When if we know a little bit of that background
Right.
of sunlight setting the circadian rhythm, which I know through this conversation we'll complete that, but prior to modern conveniences, the way humanity would have worked in most situations, very much like the example of the Amish, is we would have woke up when the sun came up. And because we didn't have as nice homes and things like that, that would have been a time to say, hey, we got to get up and get things going before the heat comes. So we'll get outside and start doing things. You're going to, without making it necessarily a health reason, you just did for natural life, you'd be outside and getting some of that morning red light into your eyes, preparing your body actually for sleep in those next coming 10 hours or 12 hours or so. So when it comes to blue light avoidance, early morning, so many people, and I'm guilty, and it's a struggle I work on as well, is having technology close or even in the bedroom, to be honest. So a good rule of thumb, it's a challenge, but it's worth the discipline for us to work towards, is trying to get technology out of the bedroom. That's televisions, that's tablets, that's PCs, that's definitely cell phones. Try and have a place in our home where we charge them and keep them out of the bedroom. That's setting a great example for the future generation, because who's going to really have to deal with this even more than us? We're dealing with it, but the kids, our kids that grow up and they don't know life before cell phones.
That's right.
Right. So early morning is problematic. You want the first light in your eyes, ideally, to be the sunlight. So it's a rule of thumb, and I'm working to get better at it, is to really discipline myself to say, okay, I want to make sure I'm not turning on lights in my house. I'm not getting on my cell phone first thing. I want to go outside and let my brain see that natural light so it can start producing these hormones, start my day off right.
Yeah.
The next, and probably as bad, if not worse, time for blue light exposure is when the sun goes down. This becomes a bigger issue in the winter for most of us, because when we get less sunlight and the sun goes down earlier, now you got more hours potentially that we're used to. And I think something that we should probably, from a health perspective, look at doing is actually changing our sleep patterns seasonally. We should get more sleep during the winter. That's a natural thing that actually takes place without modern conveniences. I asked my mom about this. Actually, when I was going through this, Mom, when you grew up, what did y'all do in the winter? She was like, there was nothing to do. We didn't have a zillion channels on the TV, and we didn't have cell phones and tablets. We'd read a book, we'd play maybe some board games, but hey, it's dark. It's about time for bed. Their bodies would naturally get tired, but the blue light, this modern convenience, keeping bright lights, not only blue, but bright. So when the sun goes down, this is a time we're starting to teach our kids and our practice, our patients, when it gets dark, that's the time to start dialing down the lights a little bit. Start to let your body know it's time to chill out and go to bed. So those are really two critical times. We've got more flexibility in the middle of the day. If we're going to spend a lot of time in front of a screen like this, it's good to have some protection on. So that's some takeaways.
So circadian rhythm, just to kind of put it together, basically it's the rhythm of the world, really, right? And we used to live in more of that world than the world we have today, where we didn't have a choice, right? But we were up at sunup because everything got bright and you didn't have a choice. Yep. And that kind of is how our body's designed to work, along with the rest of the world. We're kind of all kind of in tune. That circadian rhythm is the rhythm of the world, would you say? Is that fair?
I think it's a great way to describe it.
Yeah. And our body, we used to be more in tune with that. And now we're more pulled away from the world because we're more inside, and we have our own internal lights and our own thing, and so we're less in tune. And so I think that's just innate. That's just nature. That's just the world, I think. And the further away we get from nature and the world itself, the more we separate ourselves, the less it benefits us as a whole, right? As a species.
I think we see it in so many ways. I think we could probably do a whole podcast on just examples of that, getting away from nature and the problems that
Right.
result of
Which
that.
leads me to something else I want to hit on, and I know we don't have a whole lot more time, but I know the whole grounding thing is something that's always also been fascinating to me. I've actually even bought a couple pairs of grounding shoes and stuff like that, and
Yep.
I know some people take it really seriously, more seriously than I do, although I should take it more seriously, and actually even get up in the morning and go out and sit on the ground, watch the sun come up with your feet on the ground and stuff like that. So explain to me a little bit about the idea of grounding and what that has to do. How does that affect the body?
So a couple great resources for people to reach out and look at. There's a documentary on YouTube called The Earthing Movie. It's free. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long. There's a couple great an engineer in there on the documentary, as well as a cardiologist, Dr. Sinatra. He wrote a book called The Earthing Book. So I've gone through both of these, and they've studied most of this on grounding mats and sheets and things like that. A lot of the studies they reference, because there is science to this being connected to the earth. Tree hugger used to be like a derogatory term, right? So we would call somebody as a tree hugger, and you think that's like as a put down or something.
Yeah.
And come to find out, this is like a really healthy thing for us. This forest bathing is another word that they're describing it, is you get access when we get out in nature and get away from technology. We get this influx of negative ions. Okay. I'll kind of talk a little bit about that, but before I get into that, the studies were done on a lot of these grounding pads and sheets, and there's some, I think, cautions to use with those. They can be done right, but there can also be problems with them. So it's something to kind of look into on ways to maybe we'll have time to cover that. If not, maybe another time, some strategies to mitigate any problems with that. But just like I was saying about light bulbs, red light from incandescence, a big thing now is red light panels. You're seeing a lot of that. These are good. You can use them as tools, just like you can use these grounding sheets and pads, but nothing is good as the real thing. So when it comes to the light exposure, you're never going to get a red light panel that's as good as the sun.
Right.
Okay. You're never going to get as good, crisp, less problematic negative ions from grounding on a pad that you would being outside in nature. Now, that's not to say not to use them, because I use them both, by the way. I use healthier lighting, red lights, infrared saunas, grounding pads. I sleep on one. But to your point, there are some healthy habits in my practice. The name of my practice is healthy living. We talk about living a healthy life as a bit of a puzzle. One of the puzzle pieces is having healthy habits. Healthy habits are what they say they are, right? They're healthy things that you need to build into your life as a habit. But an example of that is some non-negotiables, I think, when you develop, like, this is really important for my life. One that most people have already is I'm going to brush my teeth, right? It's a non-negotiable. It's a healthy living habit. I already do it. Maybe I didn't think about it in that context. Maybe I did. But one healthy living habit is the daily grounding, going outside barefoot. If you can't get barefoot, going out and touching plants, grass, tree limbs, all of those things will ground you. But my morning routine is a non-negotiable. I've fallen in love with it, and it's great. As I wake up, try not pick up my phone and look at it. Walk outside barefoot. I do a little morning prayer. There's some gratitude, some time I get to spend just quiet. It's like the world's waking up. I hear the birds chirping. I hear and by the way, I do this whether the sun is out or not. Meaning, if there's clouds in the way, you still get the rays still come through it. Okay. So don't skip out on those days like, well, the sun's not out there. You can still get it. I face the sun. Okay. Now, you don't have to stare at the sun. In fact, some people say you shouldn't. Some people say there might be some benefits. But you look in the direction. Okay. And be grounded. Now, I think a good rule of thumb is a good 5 minutes is probably a great place to start. And if you can do more than that, it's like bonus points. If you can get that 30 minutes in the morning, I think that's phenomenal. I think so many of us it's challenging, but I try and do that daily to get my morning prayer, my morning sunlight, my morning grounding. And then if I've got the morning off or I got a few more minutes, I'm also going to eat my breakfast outside in that same environment.
Nice.
There's metabolic benefits to eating. Our body actually becomes more insulin sensitive and metabolizes carbohydrates or anything for that matter, more efficient in the light. So light helps with that. So I do the same thing at lunch, by the way. So a healthy living habit is I come home, I work close enough to my house that I can go home. Uh, and most days I come home, kick off my socks and shoes. I make me a little meal, go outside, stand in the yard for a little bit, eat my meal if I can, either outside in the yard or at least outside getting some sunlight. And I try to do that with as many meals as I can.
Okay. So tell me honestly, since you started doing this, you feel different?
So I like to tell the story of I'm post surgery sitting in my house. I'm not a sitter. I'm not a guy that sits around in my house. You know, you and I professionals, we're out working, helping people.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in there going crazy, but I'm really in pain. Okay. I've had to have my chest opened up. I've never gone through anything like this in my life. That's an inflammatory, potentially life-saving procedure, of course. But I'm in pain. Okay. And I'm reading this book, the Earthing book, and I'm reading Dr. Hussey's book, and they're talking about what happens when you ground. One of the things that happens, it's also just good to kind of touch on this, is when our body gets disconnected from the earth, you get this positive charge inside of our body. It actually causes the red blood cells to start to stack on top of each other. They call it a Rolio formation. It looks like a stack of coins. It thickens the blood. Now, if that's thick in high pressure areas, particularly in certain turns around the heart, that can create inflammation and stress in there. It can increase clotting factor. And increase a blood clot hitting a narrowing or just stopping up of blood vessels. That's what causes an ischemic attack, a heart attack, or a stroke. So a clue on what are you doing post surgery is I'm trying to reduce clotting factor in my lifestyle. And that's through diet, it's through light, it's through earthing, it's living an anti-inflammatory kind of lifestyle. So back to what I felt, I'm sitting there reading this stuff and I'm hurting. I stand up, walk around the house, and I'm hurting, and I'm in the kitchen and I'm hurting. And long story short, didn't matter where I went, the pain didn't leave me. And I thought, what do I got to lose? I'm gonna just go outside and stand in the yard. And I'm standing in the yard post heart surgery, and it didn't happen immediately, but within a few minutes, it was like, I swear it's easing off. So I'd hang out there for a while, and I was like, I don't know if it's just being out in nature. I don't know if this is in my head. I don't know any of this stuff. I'm just learning this, right? So then I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go back inside. In a similar way, the pain didn't come back right away, but after being in there for like 30 minutes to an hour, I'm like, oh, there it is again. Now, this could be more severe because of what I was dealing with, but I go back outside. Within a few minutes, it's easing off. And I'm like, that is a real experience that I had. And I thought, that's significant. And I'll give you one other example. So we do use grounding sheets. Or I have a grounding pad, actually, that I put on the bed. And it's grounded through the outlet. There's, again, some safe ways to do that, some testing I did to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. But I did that. And it's behind the bed where it grounds. And something, I've got 5 kids. They jump on the bed. They pull sheets off. They do stuff. At some point, this thing got disconnected. Well, of course, I didn't know. I didn't check it every night. But what I was noticing is when I was sleeping grounded, I was waking up in the morning and I would be in no pain. And I was like, wow, this is great. Now, to be fair, when I would get up and start moving, I'd be like, I had surgery. There it is, the pain. But I was waking up without pain. Before I was doing the grounding, I was waking up with pain. So now I'm waking up without pain until I moved. So then this thing gets unplugged and I'm like, oh man, I don't know what's going on. I'm waking up every morning in pain again. And I just happened after a few days of that to look behind the bed and the dang thing's unplugged. And I was like, so what did I do? Plugged it back in, got it grounded again. I started noticing the experience of less pain again. So there's other patients I've shared this with that have had very similar experiences. I've also had patients, and I think maybe you and I may have talked about this, where some people say, well, I can't really tell a difference. You don't have to be able to tell a difference to get the benefits. So that happens. Whether in the earthing movie, they show it. They've measured and looked at this Rolio formation pre and post grounding. When you get these negative ions, it decreases that positive charge in your body instantly when we ground, and the red blood cells start to separate. An inflammatory reduction in your body immediately. Wow. So I called one of the doctors that wrote one of these books and said, look, I'm looking for what's the dosage, meaning how much of this do I need to do? And he said, there's no upper limit. As much as possible. So that's when I said, okay, I need to build it into a habit, a lifestyle here that when I'm at the soccer field, shoes are off. When I'm out working in the yard and there's nothing dangerous around my feet, I'm barefoot. When I'm in the morning, I'm barefoot. When I get home from work, I'm barefoot. I'm going to do it as much as possible. And we're doing ongoing blood work and things, looking for different markers. Some of these that were good already, it's hard to measure. Well, is it better? But we know these have a positive impact on a thinning of the blood, reduction of inflammation, and reducing clotting factor. And I think from a cardiovascular preventative standpoint, it's some of the most important things we could be doing is the grounding, being out in nature, going to the beach, getting periodic sun throughout the day in a safe way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I agree 1,000%. And there's something about, nature. I mean, it's just something about it. I mean, it's always been something that people are drawn to. And I know you've experienced this. I'll have patients that'll come into me and they don't hold their adjustment very well. They always need to be adjusted. Then all of a sudden they come in one day, they get adjusted, they go to the beach for a week, come back, and you check them and they're holding.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what that tells you? I can't tell you how many times I've said this, but it means you need more vacations. And probably what it means is they just need to be out on the beach barefoot, walking on, or just be out in nature again, I mean, because that's what happens. And it's so, I see it so often. It's amazing to me.
So one of the doctors on that note, he was given a talk. Dr. Jack Cruz was given a talk. You can find this on YouTube as well. It was through the Weston A. Price group up in Vermont. And so they're at a higher latitude. They're going to get less vitamin D exposure throughout the year. And he was talking about sun exposure. And he said, listen, for strategies, the higher latitude, the further you get away from the equator, the bigger a priority it becomes for you to start to get down to lower latitudes and seek that beach, that sunlight exposure. Now, where we're at in North Carolina, we actually get a decent amount. Yeah. But nonetheless, I did share this with my wife, and it's a healthy living habit that's going to be, is when it gets to winter, I'm going to do my best for the rest of my life to seek outdoor beach time, sun time, mountain time, nature on a regular basis, but at least a long weekend every 4 to 6 weeks. And Jack talked about this in one of his talks, that's a way to mitigate, when you can't live. Now, he went so far as to move to El Salvador, so close to the equator. But even before that, he was living in Florida to try and improve this, because he went through a whole health transformation in his body. And in a similar way, because the sunlight, the grounding impacts our hormones, this impacts our metabolic health, which can be body composition. Metabolic health is, again, looking at hormones for sugar regulation, ultimately how you metabolize food, what you use for energy versus fat versus sugar for energy sources. All of these things are not just food-based, but environmental-based. Exposure to light toxins and environmental toxins. So there's consequences of modern living that we have to learn about now.
Yeah, boy. I mean, because life, is completely different. I mean, even the diet, which I definitely want to do another one with you about some of the things that we've learned. And you and I shared a lot back and forth with each other. We tried a lot, experimented a lot, and even shared our results. But, you'd look at the diet that we used to live in, right? You went out and you had a kill and you ate good for maybe a day or two, and then maybe you might go days again without eating again. So that's the whole fasting concept, which I don't want to dive into because we don't have enough time. I want to create another podcast for that. And then also you ate what was in season, right? You only ate the foods that were in season for that time of year, and that's how our bodies were designed. So when we moved inside and we got fake light and, all these LED screens and all this stuff, we have to now... We're going to learn that we're going to have to do some things to get back to our roots in order for us to live like we did, right? And to maintain our health.
Well, you brought up a big one there. And again, as you start to learn some of these things, you realize there's a lot, and this happens to me on a regular basis. I know it does you as well, is, you find a blind spot. Oh, I didn't know that existed. And then before you go down that path, you're like, wow, there's a lot here that I was missing. I thought it was this little thing. So we're talking about eating seasonally. I made this comment to a patient, I bet it was 10 years ago. And I remember when it came out of my mouth, I was like, there's something to that. And this was the comment. I said, I don't know if strawberries are healthy year round. You ever thought about that?
Right.
When we grew up, you couldn't go to the grocery store and get strawberries year round, but now you can. Is that healthy? And come to find out, in this group of people that are looking at mitochondrial health and looking at seasonal eating, they're talking about how our eyes and our brain know how our metabolism should work based upon the environmental signals that it gets. Now, what I mean by that is they talked about there are metabolic studies they've done on people that live closer to the equator, and then looking at the same metabolic markers for people that are up in Alaska or higher latitudes. And if they eat the same type of food, the impact of those food on the higher latitudes and the lower latitudes, they metabolize the foods differently. So how does that pertain to us wherever we live? Is the foods that live in your area, your brain is getting information from the environment, from the sunlight, from the different UV rays throughout the year to tell you if that food is natural to your environment. I'm not saying eating a banana is necessarily unhealthy all the time, but if bananas don't grow in my area, there's more and more evidence pointing towards that may be problematic for me in this area. I might metabolize bananas better in an area where they're actually native, and if I'm spending time in that area, but not so much in North Carolina where they don't grow. Right. So I've started to look in that in my diet is not only eating seasonally, but eating local, because my body's going to metabolize what's in season better, and it's going to struggle with things that are outside of season more.
Well, the good part about that is cows grow pretty good in North Carolina.
That's right. That's right.
They still have plenty of steak.
That's right. That's right. So that's an adjustment, right? It's also another inconvenience of modern living is like, I thought, eating strawberries would be great for me all year round, but never in history has that problem ever existed. It's never existed. Previous generations didn't have to deal with it. They don't even have to ask the question because it was not a problem.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's so much that has changed over the years that people just kind of, I think we just take for granted. We just, hey, now I can eat strawberries anytime I want. Yeah, but nobody's ever looked at, okay, well, how does that affect your overall health?
Right. The saying of just because you can doesn't mean that you should necessarily.
Right. Exactly
this becomes huge in that, right? Like I am guilty of, another example is kind of off topic, but multitasking, right? Is like, just because I can doesn't mean I should. I've been victim of thinking that I can multitask. I'm actually more efficient when I do that. And they've done studies to say when we multitask, we become less efficient at everything. Single tasking is actually the best way to do it. If I'm going to do something, focus on the one thing and then move to the next one. You'll be more efficient and more effective at single tasking, but because I can,
be a master of one rather than a jack of all, right?
Yeah.
Again, makes sense to me. Well, this has been, we could talk for probably another couple hours on everything that you and I have talked about over the years. I definitely want to set up another time to go take this to another level, but I know we're going to run out of time, and I know you've got things to be, your family's probably waiting at home on you. And then I want to save some stuff so we can get into part 2 of this. Anything you want to tell people that, are watching, that maybe, some closing remarks to kind of, what they could do to maybe kind of start implementing some of these things into their life? I think you hit on most of it. Yeah.
Well, I think a good thing maybe to drop, because you and I this is somewhat of a comfortable conversation because we've had these conversations over the last months.
Yeah.
But to be sensitive to recognize that for some people, when they watch this may be like, maybe they turned it off 10 minutes ago because they didn't want to hear. Like, I remember this experience, right, of saying, listen, I can't get away from it, so I'm just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
I think that's natural if anybody has that experience, and then to, have that emotional response, let it go, come back to it, realize none of us can change any of this overnight,
right?
But it's starting with the small things. Great book, The Atomic Habits. I think Atomic Habits is the book. He talks about habit stacking. So when someone's trying to incorporate something new, like, okay, look, I'm going to work on getting technology out of the bedroom, or I'm going to work on putting on blue light blocking glasses when the sun goes down or seeing the sun rise. Connect those things, right? Is when I go to bed and I brush my teeth, that's when I plug my phone in and I walk away. Maybe that's a strategy. When I make coffee, so I make coffee in the morning for my wife and That's one thing I do before I go outside. I get the coffee going. So when I get the coffee going, it's not ready. I'm going to go outside, do my grounding, do my sunlight. So these are ways to incorporate it. And once one thing becomes easy, if you see benefits, but even more so of just learning, that's when you can start stacking and expanding and say, what's next? And I still have a list of what's next, to be honest. I'm not perfect at these things, but I'm trying to build a better lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it's just like you said, it's creating habits, just getting consistent, and and maybe you don't have to change your entire lifestyle all at one time, but take one or two of these things that we've talked about and implement them and try them and see how it affects your life. And I think it's great. And I think people notice a difference. I've noticed a difference in a lot of the things that I've done, and I'm still got a lot of things to work on, but it just makes perfect sense. So, all right. Well, Dr. Miles, thank you so much. We will talk again soon about trying to get on the schedule again. I know you're a busy man, but we're going to have to work it out because we've still left some stuff on the table that I think we need to bring in, because I know people are going to have questions about some of the stuff, especially some of the diet stuff that we talked about.
Cool.
We'll certainly do that. So
awesome.
All right. Well, if you got something out of this, and there's a lot to get out of this podcast, please share, pass it around, because a lot of good information here that can definitely change lives. So make sure you follow us and share these videos as they come out. So thanks again. We'll check in with you next time.
Awesome.